Imagine stepping into the private chambers of England's most famous queen, expecting the sweet aroma of roses and lavender, only to be met with stifling, musky air that clings to your clothes. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, is immortalized in dazzling portraits, her face powdered to perfection, her gowns dripping with jewels. But behind the gold and glory was a side of her life that no artist dared to paint, a personal hygiene routine that would horrify you. In an age when cleanliness was more about appearances than actual washing, even a queen could carry the scent of neglect. Elizabeth ruled England for 45 years, a political genius who outmaneuvered kings, survived assassination plots, and turned England into a global power. Her image was her armor. Every hair, every pearl was carefully arranged to send a message of power. But hygiene was a different matter. In the 16th century, even the most refined people share a reality that would shock us today. Bathing was rare and sometimes feared. The belief was that warm water could open the pores, letting in dangerous miasmas and diseases. Dirt wasn't seen as a threat. Illness was thought to come from bad air, not unwashed skin. In Tudor England, ordinary villagers might wash their hands and faces daily, but full baths were luxuries. The wealthy, including Elizabeth, often believed a clean linen shirt worn close to the skin would draw out dirt and oils, keeping the body clean without water. Soap existed but was harsh, often made from animal fat and lye, leaving skin raw. Instead of regular washing, people relied on scented herbs, rosewater, and perfumes to mask odors. For the Queen, hygiene was more about fragrance and presentation than scrubbing and rinsing. Elizabeth's bathing habits were minimal by modern standards. Historical accounts suggest she bathed only occasionally, perhaps once every few weeks, sometimes even less. When she did bathe, it wasn't as simple as stepping into a tub. A wooden or metal bath would be brought into her chambers, filled with warm water infused with herbs like lavender or rosemary. Servants would prepare expensive soaps imported from Europe. The process was ceremonial, a rare event in her schedule, not a daily necessity. In her mind, too much bathing was dangerous for her health. The cold air after washing was thought to make one vulnerable to chills, fevers, and even death. She preferred to freshen up by wiping herself down with cloths soaked in rose water. Her skin care, however, was where the real trouble began. Elizabeth's pale, porcelain-like face wasn't a gift of nature. It was painted daily with Venetian ceruse, a white paste made of lead carbonate. This cosmetic gave her that iconic ghostly glow, but it was poison. Over time, it caused her skin to crack, peel, and develop sores. Instead of stopping, she applied more layers to hide the damage, creating an ever-thickening mask. Underneath the paint, her skin suffered. Egg whites were sometimes applied to give a shiny finish, but this too created a stiff, unnatural texture. She even used mixtures containing vinegar and mercury to treat blemishes, unknowingly worsening the damage. The removal process wasn't gentle either. Scrubbing with rough cloths and abrasives only inflamed her skin more. The lead absorbed into her body likely contributed to hair loss, fatigue, and other symptoms of lead poisoning. As her reign went on, she became increasingly reliant on cosmetics, sometimes spending hours in her chambers applying and reapplying makeup before public appearances. Courtiers describe her as fair and comely, but the truth was hidden under layers of toxic powder and rouge. Her teeth told another story of neglect. Sugar had arrived in England as a luxury for the wealthy, and Elizabeth loved it. She indulged in candied fruits, sugar-dusted almonds, marzipan, and spice sweets. Dental care in Tudor England was primitive, no toothbrushes as we know them. Cleaning meant rubbing teeth with a cloth dipped in soot or crushed herbs. There were no regular dentists. If a tooth ached badly enough, it would be pulled by a barber surgeon or a tooth drawer, often without any numbing beyond strong alcohol. Elizabeth's sweet tooth took its toll. Reports from foreign ambassadors mention her blackened, rotting teeth and the gaps left by extractions. This decay wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It caused constant pain, difficulty eating, and persistent bad breath. Courtiers noted she sometimes avoided speaking too closely to people, and she relied heavily on spices, cloves, and scented gloves to disguise the smell. The gloves were more than fashion accessories. They were perfumed inside, allowing her to subtly inhale a more pleasant scent while conversing. Despite these realities, Elizabeth's public image never faltered. Her courtiers and painters knew their job was to present her as a symbol of England's strength, not to dwell on her personal habits. The palace air was thick with a mixture of perfumes, burning incense, and the less pleasant odors of human life. In a world without plumbing, deodorant, or toothpaste, these smells were normal, even in the grandest courts. Yet, when you imagine her walking through the great halls of Whitehall, her gown sweeping the rush-covered floors, remember that the dazzling vision came with scent far from pristine. Behind the throne, the Virgin Queen was a master controlling what people saw and believed. Her hygiene routine, or lack of it, wasn't unusual for a time, but knowing it strips away the romanticized image history so often paints. It reveals a monarch as human as anyone else, bound by the limits and misconceptions of her era, and willing to endure discomfort, decay, and even poison to maintain the illusion of eternal beauty. In her world, appearances truly were everything, even if it meant living beneath a mask of lead and perfume. Elizabeth's crown may have been polished gold, but her famed red hair was far from the flawless tresses depicted in portraits. In truth, much of that hair was not her own. The constant use of toxic cosmetics, particularly lead-based powders, took a heavy toll on her scalp, thinning her natural hair until wigs became a necessity. These wigs, styled in the signature tight curls and elaborate shapes, were symbols of her authority, yet they carried their own hygiene challenges. They were rarely washed. Doing so risked damaging the expensive human hair and intricate construction. Instead, they were dusted with fine powders, sometimes scented with lavender or rose petals, to mask odors and give the illusion of freshness. Beneath the wigs, her real hair was likely oiled to keep it from becoming brittle, but infrequently cleaned. Lice were a constant concern in all levels of society, even among royalty, so fine-toothed combs and herbal rinses with rosemary or vinegar water would have been her main defense. Still, the reality of wearing layers of wigs, caps, and ornament for hours each day in candlelit halls filled with body heat and smoke meant sweat and stale scents clung persistently. Her clothing did little to improve matters. Elizabeth's gowns were marvels of craftsmanship, layer upon layer of silk, velvet, brocade, and embroidery. But they were heavy, restrictive, and often worn for days without washing. Linen undergarments acted as a barrier, absorbing sweat and body oils, and were changed more frequently, but the gowns themselves were rarely laundered. Water and soap could ruin delicate fabrics, so cleaning often meant airing them out or brushing them to remove dust. To keep herself smelling acceptable, small sachets of herbs like lavender, rosemary, or cloves were sewn into her garments. These gave off a pleasant aroma, masking the natural odors of an unbathed body, but they could not erase them entirely. The Queen's movements, layered under the weight of such garments, would quickly generate heat, especially during court gatherings crowded with courtiers, musicians, and servants. The mingling scents of perfume, sweat, and the faint musk of old fabric became the signature atmosphere of the royal court. This was not unique to Elizabeth. Her entire court shared similar hygiene practices. The grand halls of Whitehall or Hampton Court Palace were not the spotless marble spaces of modern imagination. Instead, the air was thick with mixed smells. Strong perfumes worn by nobles, the smoke of burning candles and torches, the aroma of roasted meats from the kitchens, and the unwashed scent of dozens of bodies in close quarters. Dogs roamed freely, sometimes in the presence of the Queen herself, adding their own contribution to the air. Even the most refined banquets were served in an environment far from sterile, with the sweet scent of imported incense working overtime to disguise the rest. To the Elizabethans, this was simply the smell of power and grandeur. Years of such habits inevitably left their mark on the Queen's health. The constant application of lead-based cosmetics not only damaged her skin, but also poisoned her slowly from within. Symptoms of lead poisoning, hair loss, fatigue, tremors, and stomach pain would have crept in gradually. Dental decay from her sugar-heavy diet worsened with time, and untreated gum infections could easily lead to abscesses, fevers, and severe pain. Bad breath, already a concern, would have intensified as her teeth blackened and fell out. The occasional lice infestation or skin irritation from rarely washed clothing and wigs would have been addressed quietly by her attendants, ensuring that her subjects never saw the less flattering side of their ruler. In her later years, Elizabeth became increasingly protective of her image, refusing to be seen without her wigs, makeup, and carefully arranged gowns. She avoided showing signs of weakness, even when her health was failing. Her beauty rituals grew more desperate. Thicker layers of powder to hide the marks on her face, heavier perfumes to overpower any trace of odor. It was said that she sometimes spent hours in preparation before appearing to her court, ensuring every pearl, ruff, and jewel was perfectly in place. But these visual victories were bought at a steep cost. As a lead in her cosmetics, the strain of tight corsets and the effect of poor hygiene wore down her body. In her final days, she retreated from public life, rarely allowing even her most trusted attendants to see her without full adornment. She reportedly sat for hours on piles of cushions, refusing to lie down, surrounded by fragrant flowers and scented fabrics to mask the unpleasant smells of illness and age. The once vivid red wigs and dazzling gowns could not conceal the toll that decades of harmful beauty practices had taken. Yet even then, she clung to the image she had built, a queen untouched by time or weakness, every inch the ruler her people expected to see. Her hygiene habits may shock modern sensibilities, but they reveal the reality of an age when water was feared, scent was armor, and appearance was as much a weapon as any sword. Elizabeth I's legacy remains as a powerful, cunning, and unyielding monarch. Yet behind the portraits and poetry lies the truth of a woman who lived in a world where the trappings of beauty were toxic, and cleanliness was measured not by soap and water, but by the strength of one's perfume. In understanding that truth, we see her not only as the untouchable virgin queen, but as a human being navigating the limitations and misconceptions of her time, brilliant in mind, unyielding in spirit, but every bit as vulnerable to the smells, sickness, and struggles of the Tudor age.